surveys for scale, interviews for detail. Hi, I'm Jason Roberts, and you're watching a Human Capital Consultancy live employee engagement interview. Today, we're joined by an employee in the United States who volunteered to be part of this live employee engagement interview. So thank you very much for joining me. How are you today?
I am doing well. Thanks for having me.
Very good. So just to kind of ask some opening questions first of all, it'd be great to understand a bit about your job and your role and responsibilities. If you could please share some of those.
Sure, absolutely. So I work for a large asset manager within their global client service team. And that team sits within our global technology and operations business. So what we do is we primarily support our institutional investment management clients. So those clients include your large multinational corporations, pensions, endowments, insurance companies, foundations, etc. And all of these clients are effectively coming to us for our expertise in asset management. So fixed income, equities, derivatives, private equity, you name it, they are looking for us to provide them with our expertise when it comes to managing their assets in accordance with their guidelines, specifications, and desired goals. And so what I'm primarily responsible for is for partnering with sales, portfolio management, and various operations teams to onboard new client assets in a seamless, efficient manner within the specific time frames that the client has outlined for us.
Okay.
I'd be happy to answer any additional questions you might have about that process.
Okay, so with such an important strategic client-facing role, from an employee perspective, do you experience frustrations that are born from your organization that impact your ability to service your clients the right way?
Sure. The best way to maybe think about it is, when it comes to servicing clients, the client, historically, the anecdote is that the client is always right. And so oftentimes there are, competing and conflicting interests internally in terms of trying to please that client in an effective way. And so oftentimes what we encounter are situations where a client has made an ask that is either difficult or in some cases actually impossible. However, that client has been promised said thing, and then as sort of subject matter expert, you have to do the delicate dance of walking that back and explaining, what it is that we can do that can satisfy their needs that may be slightly different from what they're actually asking for, just as an example.
Okay. And in terms of your job itself, how do you manage your frustrations, perhaps, or how does the business help you manage frustrations that you experience?
Well, I think one of the things that the firm tries to do is to supply an effective level of support within the management structure, whether it's regular as well as informal one-on-ones. A very, very, I know it's sort of cliche to say, but open door policy, even to speak to senior management that you may not directly report to. I think one of the really silly things that the firm does here that I've not seen at other places is it encourages teams to walk across the line and have, just face-to-face conversation, about issues and challenges, as opposed to relying so heavily on email. We use a lot of video conference as like a mandatory way to communicate internally throughout the firm, which, believe it or not, being able to see someone's facial expression, being able to read body language a lot of that stuff is helpful toward building relationships internally and helping people become more engaged. One of the things that we just recently launched was a 90-day, what we're calling an acceleration program, which might be of interest, and I can talk a little bit more about it. But it's really it focuses on the onboarding of new employees, because there's a belief that people largely form their opinions as to whether or not they're going to stay with a new firm that they've joined within the first 90 days. So if you can increase that engagement and make them feel at home, then they're likely to stay for a longer period of time. I wasn't a benefactor of that, but I did contribute to its creation. And so I think really just trying to foster open communication, support where necessary, and encouraging people not to hide behind the screens of their emails, and just really having face-to-face communication, I think, goes a long way.
Okay, so interestingly, it sounds as though what you're saying is, in an organization where trust is established across the various lines of business and various lines of seniority, it can lead to improved employee engagement, because there's an ability to open up and share and speak with who you want to speak to, irrespective of the topic.
That's right. Yeah, 100%. Because, I think people ultimately are interested in making things easy, simplifying things for our clients at the end of the day. And if you have good ideas about ways to do that, there's always going to be a receptive ear to those suggestions.
Okay.
They may not always have the time when you want to have that conversation, but picking your spots and delivering that message in a clear, concise way, I think, is always welcome.
Okay. So have you experienced situations where perhaps yourself or maybe colleagues were not confident or comfortable with sharing, opportunities to improve, opportunities to grow, or opportunities to fix things?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the situation. There might be meetings or calls or emails that it is very important for you to stay in the loop on, and for one reason or another, you may be excluded. And the last thing that I try to do is to make it about blaming an individual, although sometimes things become repetitive and it becomes a clear indication that maybe it's a symptom of a particular individual as opposed to something that's endemic. But I try to steer away from the blame game, and just trying to find ways to talk about issues and solutions in a more kind of constructive and organizational manner. And so I think in those situations, I'm probably less comfortable when it's less about a systemic breakdown in the process and more just, a bad egg, if you will, or someone that's just not playing nice in the sandbox. So I do struggle with that from time to time. Although, if it gets egregious enough, you got to call it out when it's impacting you.
So it would appear that the culture within the organization is one where it encourages open conversation, perhaps. Has there been situations where perhaps you felt disengaged from the business and did not raise a concern or question mark or challenge management because of any repercussions, perhaps?
Sure. It happens. I mean, politics are certainly a part of any organization. There's always organizational behavioral things happening in an organization that might not make you feel as welcome to being as engaged as you would like to be. There are instances where you may feel like the direction that management is taking things, or the transparency level that you're receiving as an employee isn't where it should be. No one likes to be, excuse my language, but peed on and told that it's rain. And so I think to the extent that individuals don't feel like they can trust the management that they're under, and they don't feel like their management is being as transparent as you would appreciate, it definitely leads to a lack of engagement. And I've experienced that at different times throughout my career. And in those instances, you sort of feel less a part of the whole, less connected to the direction of travel, if you will, of the organization.
So, I mean, it's quite important here, actually. It's a really good point because, often there's a lot of work put into companies, employers put into companies to improve engagement. But what you're saying here is that, in actual fact, your organization has done quite a good job to create a culture, and they've hired well to ensure that there is that transparency, that employees do feel the ability to share how they feel. And as a result, are your clients seeing the benefit of this improved engagement from the ground up?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think a more engaged employee leads to a better client experience, right? I mean, the more you feel connected to the organization, the more you feel supported, the more you're just generally happier when it comes to your day-to-day. That translates over the phone. That translates via email. That translates face-to-face because, you know that you have an organization that's behind you to deliver on what it is that you're, making promises on. You're not going to tell a client that, yes, we can provide you with these services within this time frame, and then go back to your office and find out that, there's a million fire drills for you to put out in order to try to deliver that. So I 100% think that there's a conversion factor there when it comes to employee engagement, happiness, and then an improved client experience.
Yeah, and it sounds as though the new employees, when they join the organization, as you said, you guys have identified and understood that if the new joiner orientation process is conducted correctly, it can result in perhaps the new joiner being part of the team, understanding their role, and also understanding perhaps where they contribute to the business strategy overall.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it just makes them feel a lot more important. I think the old school mindset was be happy to have a job, be happy to be in the seat, and, just sort of sit there until we give you some mind-numbing work to do until we think that you're actually qualified to do the job. Instead, right, these individuals are being treated as important contributors day one, right? They may not necessarily understand all the aspects of the business, but they've gone through an extensive hiring process. They've passed that process and beat out, hundreds, if not thousands of other candidates, and they're there for a reason. And so their voices should be heard, and they're encouraged to speak up early and often. And I think that translates to a much more fulfilling, tenure with that firm for a longer period of time, hopefully.
Yeah. So, given your experience, where if you were to compare companies, the way that your current employer conducts this whole employee experience, should we call it, is this far superior than what you've had in the past because it's been mostly old school related, old school approaches to employment?
I think so. I would say. I mean, there's probably one other firm where it was more analogous, and I think that was just a function of a very unique culture at that organization, and maybe just the way that I was brought into the organization through what's kind of called their associate program from grad school. I think they tend to coddle those particular hires maybe a little bit more than some others. But I would say here in this particular instance, these are individuals fresh out of school, so this may be their first experience in corporate America, apart from maybe an internship here or there, and it's definitely in line with what you might see more commonly at a tech firm.
Right.
Given just the popularity and how much I think tech firms are pushing the envelope forward when it comes to employee engagement, relaxing dress codes, offering more flexibility, whether it's unlimited time off or whatever the case may be. I think firms are realizing now that their most valuable asset is their employees, and they need to treat them as such. And if you work in an industry that's not tech, but you're not adopting some of those tech-like practices when it comes to employee engagement, you're not going to acquire the best talent because they're going to go elsewhere.
Okay. So just to kind of wrap this up, really, and I really appreciate your time. If you were CEO for a day, what would you do to improve your current employee experience?
Oh, that's a good one. CEO for the day. I would. Wow, I've never really given that one much thought, Jason. That's a great question. I would say, what I would do is maybe provide. One of the things that the firm I think does really well is it supports internal mobility, particularly for its senior ranks. I don't think there's a large firm that's really successful that doesn't have almost forced internal mobility for its senior leaders that have been identified. I would love to see a very similar program adopted across the board for some of the more kind of middle of the road professionals that have obviously demonstrated their worth to the firm to gain broader and more extensive experience throughout the organization. I think it builds a better leadership and management pipeline across the board that might be a bit more diverse than what we currently see throughout most organizations that are trying to adopt diversity and inclusion programs.
Yeah.
But that's one thing that I think would really be a huge benefit to the organization.
Okay. Well, look, thank you very much. It's been fantastic speaking to you. And there you have it, guys. Trust explicitly, give meaning, and ultimately a positive employee experience will positively impact your customer experience. Thank you for your time. Thank you all for watching. Don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on notifications.